I'm Matt Downing, and welcome to Diving Deep EDU.
Curious conversations with all types of peeps. Encouraging innovation, we are diving deep. Certainly education is what we like to speak. Fervent with dedication, now it is time to teach. Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in. Today we are concluding a mini-series on blended learning that started with episode number 40. Go back, check them out. They are super insightful, concise, and helpful in our path to find a way forward with blended learning. Now, today I'm not going to try to consolidate them or pick out highlights from the episodes. I made them short on purpose so that you can go back and listen to all of them. But I will say this, all of the guests I talked to on air and those I talked to off air had unique takeaways, angles, points of emphasis. To my surprise, none of my guests repeated the same points of emphasis. If nothing else, this proves the point that blended learning is complex and needs to be considered with thoughtfulness and care. I'm Matthew Downing, and today I'm going to be taking over this final episode in the blended learning mini-series. So let's get rolling. Who can we look to for guidance as we navigate the blended learning environment? Where should we turn? As I interact with teachers and students, one thing that quickly comes to the surface in respect to blended learning is the feeling of being overwhelmed, that frustration that quickly bubbles to the surface. You know the look, you might know the feeling emanating from technology, the newness of it, the constant changing of courses, the unknown. What we all need, myself included, is a calming influence. What we need is someone who can help us all take a deep breath and move forward, step by step, helping the newness become known, helping the changing courses to become traveled and comfortable. And who better to look to in the midst of blended learning than Mr. Rogers? The person who came across that TV screen and made us all feel a little bit better, made everything make sense, grounded us a bit in the important things. So I'm going to pick out a couple of his tactics that Mr. Rogers used, and potentially we could all transfer to the blended learning environment. The first thing I want to look at is those yellow lights. I love the way that Mr. Rogers started off the show with the forced slowness of the music, the extended pauses, and yes, those blinking yellow lights. It's calling the viewers to slow down, pause, prepare for what is ahead. And I really appreciate that approach and think it is something we can bring to the blended learning environment. How do we welcome learners in a way that encourages them to slow down in a thoughtful way? What is our equivalent of the blinking yellow lights? What is our version of that intro music? Whatever it is, it should aim to do the same thing that Mr. Rogers did, and that is to slow down and create a thoughtful entrance into the learning experience. What does that look like? What does that feel like for students to enter a blended learning environment that begs them, stop, pause, slow down, come in here and learn? The second thing we're going to look at is consistency and routine. One of the most popular scenes from Mr. Rogers is his cardigan and shoe exchange. The taking off, the putting on. The thing that appeals to me about that scene isn't the cardigan, which isn't always red, or those house sneakers. It's the consistency. Every episode, he went through that exchange. The efficient person inside of me wonders, maybe we can just cut that off, right? People have seen it enough. They get the point, right? Stop taking off that jacket and putting on a new cardigan. And you don't need to switch out those shoes either. Just wear the same shoes. Let's not waste this time anymore. See, but Fred Rogers thought the consistency and the routine of it was more important than packing the episode full of another scene or more stuff. The consistent routine actually had more value. Our minds are ever-changing and becoming used to the fast-paced exchange of information. However, that doesn't mean we should bypass the consistent routine. Maybe that means the opposite. Maybe that means that consistent routine is even more important today than it was when Mr. Rogers filmed those TV shows. And what does that mean for our learning environments? How can we go about routines to start, guide, and end a class? And what are those opposing forces fighting against the consistent routines, like efficiency? And how will we go about counteracting them? Another thing Mr. Rogers does throughout his shows is make meaningful connections with his guests and TV viewers. He has unrushed conversations and allows space for reflection and interactions. There is no ushering conversations along. There is an intentional listening and interacting. Connections are so critical for learning. Learning can't take place in isolation. Connections are the glue. They're the bridge. They're that Lego piece that helps connect two different worlds. So let's consider, how can we go about building these deep connections? What conversations can we have that are intentional, that are unhurried? How can we listen to what the other person is going to share without having our thoughts already formulated? See, I wonder what sort of spaces we have that foster connections within a blended, online, or traditional learning environment. You see, if we say we believe that connections are critical, then without a doubt, we're going to elevate connections to a place of prominence within our learning environment. So where are connections? Where do they take place? How can we see them in a place of prominence? The last thing I'll point out from Fred Rogers that can help us in a quest towards blended learning and learning in general is simple experimentation. Fred Rogers tried things that were different. He went outside the box. Not only was the premise of his show unique and different, but he experimented with aspects of his show. Take his puppets, for example. Not many people thought those were a good idea. They were a bit worn, and they weren't the most appealing. They were actually a bit off. But Mr. Rogers gave them a voice that spoke deeply to kids around the world. He wouldn't have known if the puppets were going to work if he didn't try. Now, not everything Fred Rogers tried worked. All you need to do is go take a look at the interview series he tried, Old Friends, New Friends. It's not that it was terrible. If you haven't, you should give it a watch. But it didn't connect. It didn't pan out. So Fred Rogers moved on. It wasn't a failure. It was part of the tinkering process. And by experimenting, he was able to experience breakthroughs that he wouldn't have experienced otherwise. So what can we experiment with? And I'm not talking about some complex experimentation that needs bureaucratic approval. Put those to the side. What is a simple experiment that we can attempt that would be similar to incorporating a puppet? What can we do tomorrow? What can we do next week? The week after? What's something that can be a simple experiment? What's something that we can tinker with? See, experimentation is a wonderful way to expand learning possibilities. And at the same time, it breathes fresh energy into the learning environment. Now, as we close, I want to make sure I point out that what worked for Mr. Rogers isn't going to necessarily work for us. I'm not calling for mirror images of Mr. Rogers across the education system. But what I am saying is that Mr. Rogers leveraged important aspects in a transformational way, and we can do the same. See, we can take what he did and tailor it to our unique personalities, to our unique giftings, to our unique contexts, and then use them to help transform the learning experience. See, this mini-series has been about blended learning, right? But it's also been about much more than that. Hopefully, it has helped you gain a glimpse and reflect upon what is possible. So thank you for joining me again on Diving Deep EDU. This is episode 49. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a pleasure. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you like this episode, you better subscribe, share it out. Please do that and leave a review. All of those things will help get this podcast out to more people. Until next time.
Wow, it's time to reflect. That's astounding. You've been checking out the podcast from Matthew Downing. Hope you like diving deep like a scuba diver. And the show provoked hope, that's our true desire.